You can turn it up if you need to. Power on the mic itself.
Test.
Oh, yeah, we'll be singing.
That's the rock.
I don't think so.
That's rock.
Okay, thank you everyone for coming out this evening, especially given the fact that the weather is a little bit threatening looking. I'm Joshua James. I'm with Cape Fear Indivisible.
You heard the lady.
Well, all right then. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so I'm Joshua James. I'm with Cape Fear Indivisible. And again, thank you everyone for coming out tonight. We will have an agenda, so there will be an invocation. We'll have a moment of silence. We will also have 4 speakers and music for the closing. So it should not take us longer than maybe 30 minutes, especially given the fact that the weather is threatening. We'll see. Yeah, we'll see. So the reason that we're here is to mark the 1-year anniversary of the violence in Charlottesville, and to remember that. We gathered here last year in response to that as well. With very, very short notice, we gathered in the same place, and the turnout was really incredible, and I see a lot of the same people here this year, so I'm glad to see that. And without further ado, we'll go ahead and have our invocation from Rabbi Eichenholz.
A little bit of teaching before the formal invocation. Today is Rosh Chodesh Elul. In the Jewish calendar, we are celebrating the beginning of a new month. And this is the last month of our Hebrew year. And it is a time where we begin, more formally, the process of repentance. Every day we will sound the shofar, we will sound the ram's horn, calling us to attention, awakening us to all that we have to do. When we get to the high holidays, we'll spend a lot of time in confession of our sins, in recognition of all the ways we've missed the mark. But for us, the majority of those have to do with the words we use and the speech that we put into the world. But it's not only what each of us have done. We don't speak in the first person singular. We speak in the first person plural. Because so much of what we've done is not only the acts that we've committed, but also that which we have let stand, that we have witnessed and not stopped. As we begin this time in the Jewish calendar, as we gather together here in Fayetteville, I know that we are all responding. We are all saying to each other and to a community larger than ourselves that we will not be silent and let things happen around us that we don't condone, that we don't agree with. And we will use our speech, we will use our words, not in destruction, not inciting violence, but we will do it to resist hate, to bring peace and togetherness. And so as I pray using Jewish terms and Hebrew language, I invite you to invoke that which is dear and near to you, that which compels you to action and to hope. Avinu Shabashamayim, God who is above, we ask that you bless all of our words and all of our speech. Adonai Sfatai Tiftach Ufi Yagid Tehilatecha. May God open my mouth that I may declare how wonderful, how peaceful, how amazing our world and our community is. That I may stand next to all those who are different from me and all those who share a common goal of unity, of love, and of cooperation. I hope that as we listen to speakers, we are all inspired to take steps to evaluate where we have come in the year that has passed and where we wish to go in the year ahead. May we all be blessed in our work and on our endeavors. and know that a year from now, when we gather again in this place and at this time, we will all be living in a better world. Amen.
Thank you. So, largely, the reason that we're here is especially to remember Heather Heyer, who was actually just a few months younger than me when she died last year. And if you will, join us in a brief moment of silence. Thank you. So our first speaker will be Miss Evelyn Holden. She'll be presenting a poem for us this evening. Miss Evelyn Holden.
Thank you. Before I begin making my presentation, I would like to just say that the particular poem that I wrote symbolizes Heather, but as we know, there's been a lot of killings in our country because of racism, prejudice, bigotry, whatever term you want to apply that's negative. But as I began to think about the words and the way I was going to write this, and as I listened to the news, I was very inspired by Heather's mother. Because honestly, I cannot understand how she's so strong. And the fact she said she wanted to be focused not on Heather, but on making a difference. And one of the things last night, I decided I was going to turn on the TV because I don't watch TV that often, but I want to be informed. But I turned on to, I think it was CSNBC, and there was this particular person who was part of the skinheads at one time. Some of you may have heard of him. I don't recall his name, but he is going about trying to eliminate hate, overcoming hate. And he met a skinhead who had all these tattoos all over him, his body, his face, everywhere. But he went to Charlottesville and he convinced this skinhead to go talk with Heather's mother. And they met at a church. And they reached out and hugged each other. But before he went there, he got rid of all of his tattoos. But I was really inspired by her and the way she described Heather and the type of person she was. So I present this poem today, symbolizing Heather. The eyes are closed, yet her vision remains, reflecting, recollecting, revealing the powerful imagination of this insightful shero to foresee a utopia of equality and justice. The heart has ceased, yet her pulse vibrates, resonating, resounding, reverberating the altruistic love of this unselfish hero to right the ills of racism. The body is still, yet her soul emerges, inspiring, inviting, illustrating the innermost desire of this courageous shero to bring harmony to this fractured nation. The larynx is incapacitated, yet her voice jubilantly echoes, connecting, communicating, communing. The intertwining soul and spirit become one, penetrating hearts and minds, invoking love forever. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we'll have Mrs. Sheila Cuffey of the Fayetteville Cumberland County Human Rights or Human Relations Committee, rather, is Sheila Smith.
Thank you, Joshua. Thank you for everyone that has come out today. I bring you greetings from the Fayetteville Arsenal Human Relations Commission, and I also bring greetings from Jimmy Buxton, the president of the NAACP, sends his regrets that he was not able to be with you today because he is out of town. But on behalf of the Human Relations Commission, I stand before you and encourage you. And I would like to thank Miss Evelyn Baker, who I've known since I was, we won't talk about that.
Okay, no mind at all. I'm happy to be here.
But she's always been a source of strength for our people, and I thank you, Ms. Baker. But when I think about the reason that we are here today, the hatred that is permeating our nation at this time, it brings me great sadness. But I think of the life of Heather, one who sacrificed. It makes me think of the words of Jesus, who said that what greater love has a man than he would lay down his life for his friend. Well, I consider Heather our friend. I consider Heather a seed. Though her body may not be with us, as she has been planted in the ground, she is a seed of love, a seed of compassion, a seed of great resilience and power. And from her sacrifice of her life, I pray that each of us will be blossoms, that we will all grow in power and strength, in fighting hatred, in fighting injustices, and in embodying and embracing love, peace, and harmony. There's much work to be done. I remember looking at the poster, and it begged the question, where do we go from here? Now, I didn't get a chance to write any eloquent speeches or anything, but when I think, where do we go from here? We move forward. We move upward and onward. We move toward love. We move toward peace. We move toward hope. We move toward empowerment of women, of children, of black, of white, of all colors, of races and ethnicities. Race, color, creed, ethnicity, age, gender identification, sexual orientation. We move toward inclusion. We move toward being one society who works to love one another, to help our neighbor. Heather was our friend. Heather is the seed of love, the seed of compassion, the seed of resilience, the seed of power. Embrace it.
All right, so next, I want to invite up a member of Cape Fear Indivisible, Miss Nina Monroe.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak. Say again? Hold it up here. Is that better? Okay. Yeah. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I've struggled with this question of where do we go from here? Because I want really solid answers for stuff. I want a really good plan. And when I started meditating on what I was going to try to say to inspire this gathering and to truly honor Heather, I decided that before I could think about moving forward, that we have to make sure, I have to make sure to look back first, because Heather is the top of a hill right now that's just made of bodies underneath her, and it's miles high. And I know that we don't have a lot of time, and I have all the Blue Note cards are the names just that I found of the victims of white supremacy and hatred since just 1836, because that's as far back as I had enough time to go, and because we don't really keep great records about all of these things. And I probably won't get through all of them. The list is certainly not complete. But I want to tell you about as many of them as I can today. And I want to ask you to say their names with me so that you'll remember them when we walk away from here, while you remember Heather, because she's not the only seed that we need to remember moving forward. 1836, Francis McIntosh. Steamboat porter refused to help the police catch a criminal. Stabbed two of the officers trying to get away from their wrongful arrest. Was arrested. A mob of angry people broke into the jail and lynched him. No one was convicted because that wasn't really a crime. 1837, Elijah Lovejoy, editor and publisher of an abolitionist publication, silenced the paper on November 7th, 1837. A mob of angry people attacked Lovejoy's place, shooting him to death, destroying his printing presses. October 24th, 1871. Some of you may know this as a Chinese massacre. We kept people in these little towns to build things for us, right? And we didn't really support them or make sure that they had food, and when scuffles would break out, then we'd severely punish them. Dr. Chi Long, Ah Wing, Chan Wan, Liang Kwai, Ah Long, Wan Fu, Tong Wan, Ah Lu, Dei Ki, Ah Wa, Ho Hing, Lo Hei, Ah Wan, Wing Chi, Wong Chin. People killed in retaliation for a minor crime. 1872, David Jones accused of murdering a white man. Mob once again breaks into his jail cell to lynch him. Negroes or railroad men are accused of his lynching, but no one's arrested or charged. 1875, Joseph Reed shot and killed a white police officer in an arrest gone wrong. Officers refused to guard his cell, so he's dragged out of it and killed. Hung from a suspension bridge, in fact, in front of spectators who were shooting him so many times that the rope broke. He lived, jumped in the water and escaped. Joseph Reed. 1888, Amos Miller. 1889, Orion Anderson. 1891, Dick Lundy. 1893, Henry Williams. By the way, he had white men who provided him an alibi. They lynched him anyway. 1891, Jim Taylor. 1891, Italian Americans. Antonio Bagnetto, James Caruso, Lorito Comitis, Rocco Giracchi, Joseph P. Machica, Antonio Marchesi, Pietro Monasterio, Emmanuel Polizzi, Antonio Scafidi, Charles Trena. Accused of murder. Trials were mostly inconclusive, many mistrials. Didn't really matter. They were taken from cells, from their homes. They were shot, hung, or beaten to death. 1893, John Peterson, William Shorter. Henry Smith, whose torture I won't describe here because it's too much for the children. 1897, Joseph McCoy. 1898, Fraser B. Baker. Benjamin Thompson, Fred Rochelle, Charles Craven, George White, Bunk Richardson, Slab Pitts, William Miller, Nelsie Patton, Zachariah Walker, Sanford Lewis, Leo Frank, Anthony Crawford, Jesse Washington, Ella Persons. I'm only up to 1917. Allie Thompson, Jim McElheron, Mary Turner, Hayes Turner, Miles Pfeiffer, Will Temple, Robert Kraske, John Hartfield, July Perry for being a successful farmer, Henry Lowry, Albert Young, James T. Scott, Sam Carter, Samuel Smith for stealing spark plugs, John Carter, George Grant, George Hughes were at 1930. Abram Smith, Charles Wright, Thomas Shipp, Matthew Williams, Raymond Gunn, Mrs. Wise, who objected to her daughter taking a ride with the Klan, John Parker for stealing peaches, Dave Tillis, Neil Claude, Elwood Higginbottom. And I know that the list is excruciating. 1965, James Reeb, James Byrd Jr. 1998, his was, dragged to death behind his car by white supremacists. 2008, Brandon McClellan, also dragged to death behind his car by white supremacists. This is just the list of people you can find on Wikipedia killed by lynching. And it's not complete. It's already too long. I haven't even begun to touch the names of the people killed in this country by police brutality. I haven't even begun to talk about the people killed in this country because of Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, any form of white supremacy that has been embedded in our system for hundreds of years now. And it all, I could list their names for the rest of the evening, probably into next week and longer, and we don't even have all of them. Then we could start talking about just the people who haven't died, people who live in poverty, people who are wrongfully arrested, the entire community's worth of people who are incarcerated right now because of the color of their skin, who can't afford to get out because we oppress the impoverished too. And still, it would be incomplete. The dirge leads us to last year, to Charlottesville, to Heather Heyer, where we have to make it stop. I want to remind everybody that she wasn't alone that day. There were 2 police officers with her. There were 17 other people injured when a white supremacist drove his car into a crowd of people resisting hate. One of the things that I was struck the most by when I started compiling this terrible list was how easy it was to find information about the people who had killed these folks. How easy it is to find the information that glorifies these white supremacists. When I started looking, there was nothing. You can go and check me and Google it yourself. If you look up victims of white supremacy, you do not get this list or anything remotely like it. What you get is pictures of murderers. You get information about their hobbies and their background and analyses about whether or not they were mentally ill or were they lone wolves or any number of other things that isn't focusing on the fact that they are murderers, that they are spreading hate. And you have to go looking in all sorts of other little corners to find the names of the people that we need to be remembering today. So I couldn't come here and talk about moving forward and talk about honoring Heather Heyer because she deserves it without reminding you how she is connected in a very long, long history of things that we have to resist. And I'm going to try to bring it around to something a little better than listening to this, because I know that this is hard and this is uncomfortable. But all of the people who have come before me are leading you in the right direction, because the only way that we win this, the only thing that fights the hate is the love. And you're like, well, we've heard that before, right? That's a cliche. What do? What does love mean, right? I could tell you, and I will tell you, the big things, go to the rallies, go to the voting booth, go and engage your elected officials about clearly racist policy. Do that. And those are all good things, but that isn't enough, because love is a choice of behaviors that you make every single day, especially when it's hard to love the person that you're looking at for whatever reason. And we have to start from the bottom up. It's not going to come from the top down. They've proven that. It has to start here and every single day. It has to start with going to churches other than your own. It has to start with shopping at stores that you don't normally spend your money at. It has to do with smiling at people who look differently than you at the grocery store. It's that level of commitment to love every single day with your neighbors. Even when you're tired, even when it hurts, even when your tank is empty, every day. And I know that you guys are doing it. I'm going to ask you to redouble it and show your neighbors how to do it. We have to confront it with our friends, with our families, in our neighborhoods, and we have to show other people how to confront it. We have to stand up with our neighbors who are learning how to confront it and support them when they take those first steps. We have to spread it as a community. That's how love works. That's how we make it a choice, and that's how we win this thing. Thank you.
Thank you. I do want to acknowledge any public officials or people who are running for office who might be here today. If you could just raise your hand, any of you. Kirk's here. Thank you for coming out. We did extend invitations to the city council and county commissioners. We heard back from 2 of them. They had prior engagements, and really we didn't give them a lot of time either to respond. So you can see that letter actually on the page for Cape Fear Indivisible, though, the invitation that we extended to them, if you would like to take a look at that. So there will be one final speaker, and that's actually me. I just want to, when we gathered here last year, I gave an impromptu brief history lesson about the Arsenal itself. I won't do that this time, though it will be history as well, but I'm not going to focus on the site of the Arsenal itself this time. I just wanted to provide some background because I chose this time, 5:30, because I knew that this was the time that the Unite the Right 2 rally was scheduled for Washington, D.C. And I wanted us to be not distracted from it, but to provide some sort of other outlet, something other for people to do than just watch the live stream online. So prior to an election in 1898, the Fayetteville Observer, our hometown newspaper, published an appeal from Furnifold Simmons, who at that time was a member of the House of Representatives from North Carolina. And he made an appeal to the voters, the white voters of North Carolina. He argued that this was the last chance, this election that was upcoming was the last chance for them to overthrow what he called Negro domination in North Carolina. This was part of a much larger campaign, a white supremacist campaign, and that's what they called it. It was a campaign for white supremacy, to regain white supremacy, or at least as they saw it, regain it in North Carolina. Simmons warned that black men and their white allies were planning on voting illegally, planning on voter fraud, planning on bringing in people from South Carolina and from Virginia to vote in North Carolina's election. He claimed that across the state, black men were assaulting white women. And he warned that if whites did not take action, what he called Negro domination would continue indefinitely. In his view, whites were a silent and oppressed majority. So across North Carolina, terrorism was used to suppress the black vote. The black-white fusion government of Wilmington was overthrown in a violent coup, the only successful coup in United States history. And it worked. After 1898, the black vote in North Carolina was effectively suppressed. A black politician would not be elected to Congress from North Carolina again until 1991. But that was years ago, and it was last year, and it's now. Because we're standing, literally standing among the ruins of the Civil War. But why was the Unite the Right rally held in Charlottesville last year, which is just a small college town? Because the city was considering the removal of a statue of Confederate General Robert E. Lee. Because that statue, erected in the 1920s, coincided with the rebirth of the Ku Klux Klan. Because, yes, that statue is a historical artifact, but not of the Civil War, but of Jim Crow. Because the majority of Confederate monuments were not built by the generation that fought in the Civil War, but by their children. They were built in two periods: at the turn of the 20th century, around 1898, when those things were happening, the voter suppression in North Carolina, and in the 1920s, with a smaller spike during the Civil Rights Movement. Because symbols like Confederate statues have meaning. Because the white nationalists and white supremacists who gathered in Charlottesville last year knew exactly what those symbols meant, even if we pretended not to. Because symbols can unite a community or they can divide it. Because symbols like a flag or a song or a statue can send a message that, yes, you may live here, but you don't belong here. Because nostalgia, laced with racism and xenophobia and misogyny, is powerful. And I want to make something clear. White supremacists, they're not envisioning a white-dominated society because they don't have to. They're trying to preserve one because that's our status quo. Because white supremacy is not just angry, red-faced racists in front of the White House. It is our reality. It is gerrymandering. It is gentrification. It is our criminal justice system. It is attacks on immigrants and Muslims and people of color. It is disparities in wealth and housing and spending on education. The founders, believing it necessary, built our nation on the fiction of race. That foundation can't sustain the inevitability of our diversity. It can't sustain our successive generations. And if we don't recognize it and radically reconstruct that foundation, then we will collapse back into it, like so many bricks at an arsenal, buckled under the heat of fires that we started but then could not control, locked in our different rooms, unable to see one another until it's too late, hearing the last gasp as the rest of it collapses. Thank you. Our last I do want to mention the Heather Heyer Foundation. After she was killed, a few months later, her mother and her employer established a foundation to, in their words, award scholarships to those seeking a degree or certification in, but not limited to, law, paralegal studies, social work, social justice, and education. We do have a link to the foundation on the Facebook page for Cape Fear Indivisible if you would like to donate to that. I actually just left a comment mentioning this rally on the page for the foundation, and her former employer responded to that, thanking us essentially for gathering and for attempting to raise funds for that organization. We'll be back next year if we can help it and if the weather holds up, to remember not only Heather Heyer but all of the other names of people who have suffered to maintain power for white supremacy, because the violence is only a small part of it. The outright physical violence, it's the violence that we don't see that is the larger crime, the violence of poverty and the violence of systemic racism. So we do have a song or music to close us out from Mrs. Jeray Payton. Would come up and we will appreciate that greatly.
Oh Lord my God, when I in awesome wonder consider all the worlds thy hands have made, I see the stars, Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. When Christ shall come with shout of acclamation and take me home, what joy shall fill my heart. Then I shall bow in humble adoration and there proclaim, my God, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art.
Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who came out this evening, to all of our speakers, and to everyone who worked to bring this together. And we will see one another next year. Hopefully there will be more of us. And please continue to follow the page for Cape Fear Indivisible if you don't already. We're easy to find on Facebook. We will be very busy during the next few months especially. But we hope to see you in the community as well. So thank you so much.
That was amazing.
I got you right here.
Please, before you leave, introduce yourselves to each other. The greatest thing that we can take from these events is unity and solidarity. So we need to know each other and know that we are not alone in this fight. Thank you so much for putting this together. You guys are great.
I'm Katie. Nice to meet you.